Alright boys, I'm gonna tell you now, this video was a little difficult for me to make because it required me to be blatantly 100% honest, especially about the type of games I play. And now that I really think about it, Borderlands isn't exactly the game I thought it was. So, what's up ladies and gentlemen, it's your man Jay, and I'm here with a hot take today. So let me start by setting this up, okay? The year is 2012. And I already know I lost a bunch of you. But at the time I was working at GameStop and it was just huge ample amounts of hype. And this was like September, I believe. Yeah, huge amounts of hype for Borderlands 2 getting ready to come out. And of course, at the time, Borderlands 1 coming out and really defining the loot shooter genre that wasn't like an MMO or like specifically RPG type of thing. It was huge. It like really blew up out of nowhere, and not a whole lot of people were expecting this particular game to do as well as it did or be as awesome as it was. But really the game had just amazing things, from the RPG style system where you go back and you fight bosses for better loot, and the more you actually killed them, the higher chance you got to get that like specific piece of loot that you were getting for. So it was very human desire based RNG, which just made it amazing. And then there was also the characters, the locations, the story, all of the amount of like funny shit that was put into this game really was amazing. And the only other game I could think of at relatively around that time was the Time Splitters franchise, which I know all of you guys are way too young to understand that, but we'll make a video about that another day. But man, that game was something where it seemed like the humor was first and the actual video game was like later on. So it was like a secondary thing to it. Now, I guess we can kind of talk about Borderlands 3. I mean, with Borderlands 2 having launched and the game was really insane and it just did amazingly well and just changed the business of everything. Because like when I was working at GameStop, right, and this was like, it was over in Beverly Hills, the store didn't get a whole lot of business except for like game launch nights. We're talking like Call of Duty, we're talking Halo, God of War, anything like that. The store was always busy with like the midnight releases. And there was just some other level type of hype, and I've never really experienced that before for a game that wasn't Call of Duty or Halo or Street Fighter or anything like huge like that. So this was like monumental that it could even exist. The one thing that Borderlands really set forward was that there was like no real gimmicks to the game except for grind it out and get better loot, while also feeling fun at the same time. Unlike games where you had like Destiny or The Division or anything like that where you couldn't trade items. Like I remember at one point in time there was a bug that was in the first Borderlands game that also got ported over to the second Borderlands game, and Randy Pitchford, the game director, you actually had the ability to duplicate items by using the trading system. And so I remember in Borderlands 2 when a bunch of players like had found out like, hey, the exploit is still in here. I remember Randy Pitchford, I think it was on their website or on his Twitter, and he was and I quote, he said, "Oh, you found the exploit, have fun." That was it. That, like, it was literally that simple. No need to patch it, no need to fix it, no need to worry about it. Like, people are using it to play the game and have fun. Whereas like some of these other games, it's like, oh, you found an exploit, we have to fix that in a PvE setting. Like, who fucking cares? But, you know, whatever. 2012 and 2019 were two completely different eras where it was just like, hey, you want to play the game, you gotta pay extra money for the start menu. So, but that's just me. And then, honestly, Borderlands 2 is just one of those amazing games where all of the things mixed in kind of just solidified that it is the king of loot shooters, and it always has been, and it probably always will be. I don't see a game ever coming, especially not after 2018, 2019, and 2020. I don't see any other loot shooter games being as good, as fun, or as compelling as Borderlands 2. Now, with all of this said, where does Borderlands 3 drop the ball? Because that's really what we're talking about here. Borderlands 3, without going into too long a detail, because there's still another half of this video I have to talk about, Borderlands 3 genuinely feels like a disappointment in certain areas, like the settings, the character interactions, you know, stuff like that. Really, really important stuff. The story, the mechanics, and the characters are probably the three biggest things. The mechanics will kind of give a pass on just because, you know, new graphics engine, the weapons handling, all right, whatever. We'll scratch that one. So mostly the characters and the story. Now, the biggest problem I had with Borderlands 3, it's the twins. Honestly, Tyreen is just one of these characters I really, really wanted to like, and so is Troy. But the problem is, they're too busy trying to be Handsome Jack. And that's the problem. That was an amazing thing in Borderlands 2, even in Far Cry 3, where the main villain, well, not main villain, Far Cry 3, but the villain was such a compelling and interesting character that you wanted to know more about him, that you actually were interested in this character and the things that they would say and the things that they would do in response to the player character. Whereas Tyreen and Troy just feel like this really gimmicky, kind of super pandery type of thing towards like millennial streamer viewers and stuff like that. Like, it was just really, really weird. Whereas like it wasn't like the main focus of the game, unlike a game like Watch Dogs 2, which did something very similar with all of the bosses in the game that are tied to your social media following and stuff, but that also was tied to the direct progression of your game. So it was like, instead of it being like a weird plot point, it is now the like precise thing that you need in order to measure how far you are in the game. So it made sense in that context, but not in Borderlands. So it's just really, really weird seeing these characters that you don't really care about, and it's just, the game is trying to force their likability on you, and it's just not there. That was a huge issue for me. Another thing is the amount of character interactions we have in this game. Now, obviously, it's Borderlands 3. You expect people to have played at least Borderlands 2. But there's a lot of stuff even playing throughout the rest of the game. And as an avid Borderlands fan who has played the Tales of the Borderlands series, as well as Borderlands pre-sequel, putting the story together and trying to figure out where's Scooter, who is this guy, who is that girl, why do I care about this person, without any context or other information whatsoever at the beginning of the game is a little tough to grasp, even for somebody who has played the previous games. So that was kind of weird, but I'll let that slide. Sure, the biggest, like the secondary biggest thing aside from Tyreen and Troy is the character interactions, because that was something that was really, really weird, that Brick, Mordecai, and Tina are in like 3 or 4 missions in the entire game, which is super weird considering Zero's through like half of the game, yet somehow is still the exact same character he was in Borderlands 2. He's the same little quirky, funny, but also really, really badass assassin that we're used to in Borderlands 2. So it's very interesting how no other characters were implemented in there. I would have really, really liked to see Axton play some type of role, especially because he was such a bland character in Borderlands 2. There is a Krieg Easter egg. I found one where he's having like an inner monologue, but that's about it. And he's a DLC character. There wasn't any, I didn't see anything about Gage, and I didn't see anything else. And I guess Maya, but without spoiling too much, like Maya is a huge part of the game. Okay, great. But the amount of time that you actually get to spend with Maya as a character, going out on missions and stuff like that, or even interacting with her in Sanctuary, was just really hard to like grasp, I guess, because of such short amount of time that you spend with these characters. But those are like my biggest issues. And the story is just kind of boring. Like, I don't know, it doesn't sit with me well this time, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm sure you guys have your own. But with that, all that being said, as we talk about story, as we talk about DLC, as we talk about characters, I have to bring up the second part of this video, The Division. Now, of course, if any of you guys have been on my channel long enough, you know I was super excited for The Division. You guys know I'm a shill when it comes to Ubisoft games. I buy every single one. I give it 10 out of 10, blah, 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 blah. Everything, all the rumors everybody says about me is absolutely true. Yes, 100%. Sure, why not? So at the time of The Division launch, I remember playing the beta with a few friends of mine, and it was awesome. gunplay was great. The RPG style looting was great. It felt like a very, very close to a team tactical shooter with like these very tanky enemies and still being able to play an RPG game. That's exactly what it felt like. But then when the full game came out, it was kind of like, I don't know. This seemed like a really good concept when The Last of Us did it, about this worldwide infection. And I think at the time, even Dead Island was getting more popular. There was just tons of zombie craze in between 2012 and 2013 and 2014. Like, and then piggybacking that into 2015, into the PlayStation 4 era, like all of that stuff all of those waves were still being ridden. So I understand it. But the first Division game was plagued with tons of PvP issues, bugs, and glitches all over the place. Ones that made the game more fun, yes, way more fun. But also, the game's environments were horrible. The setting, the story was very unforgettable. Weird patch times, server shutdowns for no reason. The game economy became really bad about how much grinding you had to do for currency in that game. And it just became really unfun because there was nothing that you got attached to like you did in Borderlands 2. In Borderlands 2, you get attached to all of the characters and you want to do all of these adventures and these cool things with all of these people. And everything is so bright and colorful and fun to be around, and the jokes that get sling around. Whereas the Division didn't have that. It didn't have any memorable characters. It didn't have any memorable moments. It didn't even have any memorable weapons. That was like, oh, this weapon is named after another Ubisoft game or something like that. Like, whereas Borderlands 2 had tons of callbacks to Borderlands 1, and even Borderlands 3 had tons of callbacks to Borderlands 2, Borderlands 1, and pre-sequel. Now, I understand the Division is not going to have access to that, but given Ubisoft first party owns all of these games, there could have been some Sam Fisher DLC, some Assassin's Creed stuff, some Rainbow Six Siege stuff, a whole Rayman. They have the IPs, and which is so weird that Rainbow Six Siege doesn't do this too. You could cross-pollinate a lot of your cosmetic items, and I use this with quotations because it'll just basically be paid DLC, like pay $2.99 and get an Assassin's Creed like gun skin or something like that. And it's like, these are the ideas that come across these people's heads. So that's just one thing. But with all of this being said, The Division was not all a bad game. It was still fairly fun to play, really grindy in a fun kind of way, especially while the bugs were active. Maybe not so much the PvP ones, because those were just busted. That stuff I didn't like, but glitching in and out of levels and being able to beat bosses faster on harder and harder difficulties every time you play it, making the game way more challenging, and being able to have the freedom to play this game any way you want instead of extremely linear of go to point A, B, C, get ambushed at D. It's like, okay, this is great. I enjoy this. But now this brings me to The Division 2, which honestly, I didn't pick it up at launch. I really didn't think it was going to be a game that I wanted to play, but because of the recent $3 sale, all of my buddies, we all got together and we were like, hey, okay, so we're gonna drop the $3 on this game, just like how we dropped the $17 for Destiny 2, and we enjoyed that. So let's give this a try. So paid $3 for this game, and I genuinely feel like I robbed Ubisoft. 100%. I feel like I got away scot clean. Gone, finessed, my boys. I got away with the biggest Shiola. Trust me on this. This game was far better than I thought it would be. I genuinely feel like I took advantage of this situation, because paying $3 for this quality of game, which it is great quality. I feel like the Division 2 learned, and the Ubisoft team behind it really learned a lot from Destiny, Destiny 2, Borderlands, and even their own previous The Division. This game is so much better. I mean, there's still no like direct trading and things like that, or PvP matches with your friends like how Borderlands has. That would have been cool, but you know, whatever, one step at a time. But this game feels really good to play. A lot of the grinding doesn't, and maybe this is because it's after post-launch, a year after all of these patches, some free DLC has been given out. Maybe that's why it's so good at this point. But in comparison to the Division 2 now and Borderlands 3 at launch, which I expected to have the same at least be as good as Borderlands 2. At least. I did not have these wild expectations of thinking this is going to be better than all of these other games and stuff like that. No, I did not have any of those expectations. I just expected it to be Borderlands 2 but more. And I almost did not receive that, honestly. I really didn't. But The Division 2 has yet to disappoint. I feel very strange having Borderlands 3 and then paying only $3 for The Division, because now at this point, I'm going to buy the Division DLC. I'm going to buy everything that they have, especially after the fact that they have clearly learned from their DLC roadmap of the first Division game, which by far is one of the most creative ways to establish DLC, because it was in-game events that coincided, both free and paid. They coincided with one another in order for all players to advance together almost at the same time, leading up to the survival DLC, which I think was named perfectly, but that's just me. And it turned into a survival game where you had to manage your resources and how cold you were and eating food and having water and stuff like that. The Division 2 needs more of that. But as of right now, it's really impressive. I really feel like I should have paid $60 for this game. So as compensation, I have to go and buy the other DLC because I'm enjoying this. Borderlands 3, not really feeling it that much. And especially because your last game had one of the greatest game experiences I have ever had since The Last of Us, which was Tiny Tina's Dragon Key. That right there is probably one of the greatest levels, DLCs, whatever you want to call it. It was probably one of the greatest pieces of game media I've played in a very, very long time. It was so refreshing. It's a game of Dungeons and Dragons in Borderlands 2. Amazing. So Borderlands 3 still has plenty of space. There's plenty of time. The verdict is not out yet. I'm clearly really tired of talking about this because I'm salivating all over the place, and I really, really just want to play some Division 2, and I really, really want Borderlands 3 to be good. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to give it a like. How do you feel about Borderlands 3 in comparison to Borderlands 2? And at least I can say this about both the Division 2 and Borderlands 3. They are both better than Destiny. But that's just me. That's my opinion. This has been your man Jay. I will see you guys next time. Be sure to keep it canon.